In this video series, I am going to talk about AlwaysON. AlwaysON has been introduced in SQL Server 2012. It's a combination of high availability and disaster recovery. Okay, in some places you might see the name HADR. For example, if you are looking at system stored procedures or DMVs, you will see this HADR term. Okay, so basically Microsoft in the CTP release they named it as HADR, but later on in the RTM release they named it as a AlwaysON. Okay, probably for better marketing purposes, or AlwaysON is more fancier than HADR or ABCD. Okay, so basically it's a combination of high availability and disaster recovery solution. Prior 2012, you might use clustering, replication, log shipping, etc. to attain high availability and disaster recovery for your application. But now with AlwaysON, one technology for both high availability and disaster recovery. Okay, so basically it's a database mirroring plus. I would say it's a advanced future of database mirroring, AlwaysON. If you know database mirroring well, then probably you know AlwaysON. Okay, it's advanced future of database mirroring. Okay, there are some problems with database mirroring, like you cannot have more than one replica, more than one mirror. Okay, more than one secondary database. You cannot read the secondary database. Like that, there are some major disadvantages with database mirroring. Okay, but database mirroring has its own use, like having a having a secondary database on a disaster recovery server. But the problems have been identified in database mirroring and they're corrected in AlwaysON. Okay, so I would say read database mirroring well, because AlwaysON is based on database mirroring. I have created some bunch of videos on database mirroring. You can go through those videos, or you can take a book and read the database mirroring. Okay, so it's AlwaysON is basically a database mirroring plus. Okay, so you have to know the database mirroring well in order to have a better understanding of AlwaysON, how it works internally. Okay, so before we take on AlwaysON, let's go through how we used to architect high availability and disaster recovery prior 2012 versions. Okay, first we talk about high availability. What is high availability? High availability means how much time your database will be available to the applications. So generally there are a couple of things people say, 99.9 or 99.99 or 99.999. This is called 5 nines. That means your database is highly available to your application. So how do you achieve this basically? So what are the technologies we used to have before SQL Server 2012? Okay, we can use following technologies or following methods to achieve the high availability. Clustering, it's well known and old way and still good. Still holds good. Okay, and you have replication. You can use replication to make the database highly available. Okay, you can use log shipping. Sometimes you can use database mirroring. Okay, these are various technologies or methodologies you can use for the high availability. Predominantly people use clustering. Okay, so let's discuss about every technology, and let's discuss about the advantages and disadvantages of them. Okay, first let's talk about clustering. In the clustering, you have two servers, and here is your SAN storage where you will store the database files, MDF and NDF, LDF files. Okay, and let us say this is your application server. Okay, and you cluster these two servers for this application. This is node 1. Let us say this is node 1, node 2. When this server goes down, and this server will start processing the request. So you have the hardware failure redundancy. If there is a problem in server, the hardware might go down. Okay, so or some problem with the server. So in that case, the cluster technology will fail over the services to the other node and start processing the request. So here you are covered with the server failure. But how about the SAN? If the storage goes down, your cluster goes down, your database is not available. You have to do something to bring the shared storage up and available again in order to make the cluster up and running. So this is not a complete high availability. Still, it is good in the terms of the server failures, but not so good in terms of the media failures. Okay, so there are some disadvantages with that. Now let's talk about replication. In the replication, you can set up the first you can set up the snapshot, and after that you set up the transactional replication. Okay, but the thing is, you cannot have a complete copy of database, because replication in the articles you can publish tables, views, and certain type of objects, not every object in the database. Okay, database will have several objects, so it is not a complete replication. You can save up to some extent, but not complete. It has its own disadvantage, like this is not a hard standby. There will be, if the data is heavy, then there will be some lag. The lag might run from seconds to minutes and hours. Okay, and people generally don't use replication for high availability. Companies use replication for reporting purposes. Okay, you always have to expect some lag, and it doesn't contain the entire database. All the information in the database will not have on the secondary server. Okay, it has its own disadvantages. So this technology, replication, not very suitable for high availability. Clustering is okay. Okay, no, so let's look into log shipping. We have this technology, log shipping. So let us see what it does. In the log shipping, you have primary server and secondary server. Here in the log shipping, you have, let us say you have a couple of database. You set up the log shipping between these two servers like this. Okay, So basically what log shipping does, it takes log backups of these two databases and restore it on this server. It continuously take log backups and keep restoring it on the secondary server. Okay, you can set it up, okay, every 3 minutes, every 5 minutes you take log backup. But what happens if your server goes down within that 5 minutes period? Okay, it's not hard standby. Log shipping is not a hard standby. Okay, it is a warm standby. You always have to expect some lag between primary and secondary. Okay, so if you set up 5 minutes duration the log shipping, then there will be 5 minutes delay. So typically you can use it as a warm standby, this server. Okay, it is not a complete high available, but some companies might use it. And the disadvantages, there are many disadvantages, like sometimes log backups might run in gigabytes and it takes some time to copy and restore it on the secondary servers. Okay, sometimes the file might corrupt, so again you have to take a new log backup, or log. So you have to do something. You have some challenges in log shipping, but you can use log shipping for high availability. Okay, but not preferred. And even replication is not a complete database to database copy on the secondary server, so typically you won't be using that for high availability solution. Clustering, yes, you can use it for high availability. Yeah, better than these two technologies for high availability. Okay, let us look into disaster recovery. Clustering is a high availability solution. You cannot use clustering for disaster recovery. Okay, so let's skip that, because this is not a solution for disaster recovery. This is a high availability solution. Now let's look into replication. Again, the replication problem is your secondary server is not a exact replica of primary. The reason is you will not have all the objects in the primary server. Okay, and there will be lag, and you have some challenges. So this is not a complete disaster recovery solution, but still you can use it as a disaster recovery purposes, but not preferred. Log shipping and database mirroring are primarily used for disaster recovery purposes. So if this server goes down, then you have the secondary server. You can use the secondary server as a primary server. So you can use the server for disaster purposes. Okay, if some disaster happens to this server, then you can use the secondary server. You have to expect there will be some delay, or you might lose some data. Depends on the frequency of the log backups. Okay, database mirroring, I would say this is perfect for disaster recovery purposes, this technology, database mirroring. Okay, so in the database mirroring, let's write it down, new page. Database mirroring. Okay, so you have two databases on the primary server. This is secondary server. Okay, you call this as a mirror server. This is principal and mirror. Okay, primary and secondary are the log shipping terms. So you set up the database mirroring between these two servers. This is primary server and this is mirror server. Okay, you can set up mirroring per database level. Okay, you cannot set up database mirroring for the entire instance. You have to create database mirroring at the database level. Okay, so at the same time you can have only one copy. You can have only one secondary of the primary database. You cannot have additional copies. For example, if you have one more server, okay, and you cannot create multiple child or multiple copies of this primary. You can only mirror from this database to a database on a secondary. You can set up async or sync, whichever way you prefer, depends on your network connectivity. If you have super duper network, then probably you can go for sync. Sync means when a record comes into the primary database, that record will be inserted here, will be committed in the primary database and committed in the secondary. Then the response goes back to the client saying that your record has been committed. Okay, that is what is called a sync. That means both database are synchronized. The data in both database are same, primary and secondary, the data is same. Async means the record first will be inserted here and it will be queued to the secondary server. So it takes some time, usually a couple of seconds. Sometimes if there are too many transactions, or if you run index maintenance or something like that, generate a lot of log activity on the primary, then there will be a significant delay. Okay, so you have to look into redo queue and blah blah blah. So many things are there. So async generally holds good if you have a lot of activity going on in the primary, and if you have unreliable network. Okay, but sync is good to have hot standby. Hot standby means both database contain same data, that means synchronized data. Okay, async you cannot expect hot standby. Warm standby is applicable in case of async. So database mirroring is good for disaster recovery purposes. And you can use in the database mirroring, you have something called witness server. You can have SQL Express edition. You can install Express edition or Express or any edition for that matter. You can have one more SQL Server box that will monitor these two servers, primary and secondary. If this server goes down for some reason, then this monitoring server, it will make the secondary as a primary. Okay, but you have to set up sync option between these two servers, then only it will do a automatic failover. Okay, automatic failover will not happen if the two servers are running in async mode. Okay, it has to be running on sync mode, synchronized mode, and use the monitoring server to do a automatic failover. Okay, there is a so you can say, okay, so database mirroring looks like a disaster recovery and high availability. Okay, right? Yeah, this seems to be good. This seems to be promising in 2005. A lot of people still use database mirroring, but there are no disadvantage with database mirroring. Of course, it's there are some limitations. I won't say it's a disadvantage entirely. The limitations of database mirroring is that you cannot have multiple copies of secondary. For example, let us say your BA users, business intelligence developers, use this server for reporting purposes. Okay, and there is some other group, SharePoint group wants to read the database from this server. So you wanted to have a copy of this database here as well as here. That is your requirement. Simply it is not possible with mirroring. Mirroring, you can only have one secondary database for the primary database, and moreover you cannot read this database. It will be in the restoring mode. You cannot read the secondary database. It is just purely for the disaster recovery purposes. If you have configured the monitoring server, then monitoring server will make it as a primary when this server goes down. But this server didn't go down. Primary is still active and processing the request. I wanted to read this secondary database for reporting purposes. Okay, that is not possible. So two major limitations or drawbacks, you can say. You cannot read the secondary, and you can have only one secondary. Okay, so AlwaysON, what these are the changes, major changes in AlwaysON. AlwaysON is a database mirroring. with two enhancements, significant enhancements. You don't need to have monitoring server for automatic failover. AlwaysON has an inbuilt feature or inbuilt technology to do automatic failover. You just specify primary server and secondary server and it will do automatic failover. Okay, so how it does? With the use of clustering technology. Behind the scenes it uses SQL, the Windows cluster, to do the automatic failover using the quorum. Okay, that is different, but outline is you don't need monitoring server to do the automatic failover from primary to secondary in the AlwaysON. Okay, that looks good. And also in the AlwaysON you can have up to 4 servers. You can have 4 secondaries. Okay, for this primary database you can have copy on 4 servers. That means you have 4 copies of primary database. Okay, on this server, on this server, on this server, and this server. Okay, you can have 4 copies. That so this server, one set of developers can use it, and this server you're reporting or SharePoint or like that. So various groups in the IT can use various server. So you can have some kind of something like a load balancing. Okay, and moreover you can read the database in the AlwaysON. So the problems in the database mirroring has been identified and rectified in the SQL Server 2012, which is called as AlwaysON. In the future, in the next release, probably there might not be a database mirroring. SQL Server might completely deprecate the database mirroring feature, because AlwaysON replaced the database mirroring. Okay, so that is something you may have to think about it. But still, in 2012 you have the database mirroring feature. You can set up database mirroring or AlwaysON. You cannot set up database mirroring and AlwaysON on the same database. Okay, because both are same. All right, so that's what pretty much in brief about AlwaysON. Let us discuss in detail about AlwaysON. So let's see how to set up AlwaysON.